What's going on, everybody? This is Chris from AppSumo with the Remote Work Academy, and I am super excited to get going because we have an incredible guest today. We have Thomas Frank. I have learned a ton from him on his YouTube channel. Thomas, thank you so much for joining today. This morning, we got a ton of people rolling in right now.
Absolutely, happy to be here.
So for those of you,
share some of the stuff I've been nerding out about.
And you've been doing this for how long would you say you've been in? Because you've been on YouTube since 2014, you were just saying, but how long has that all been around the like productivity, self-optimization area or what?
Yeah, it's been productivity and kind of self-improvement for the entirety of my career as a content creator, which started in 2010. And that was all kicked off by me applying to write for like a college hacks blog and getting rejected and not wanting the post that I had written as my audition to go to waste. So I just put up my own blog, and it was funny because like during college, I wasn't that interested in writing about academic success. I was more interested in writing about general productivity or entrepreneurship. So that's kind of where I specialized before getting into YouTube. And then I eventually got to YouTube. I spent a lot of my time on YouTube initially focusing on getting my academic success content base built out because I was running a college website that had very little of that, which is kind of ironic. And now these days it's kind of gone back to more productivity focus just because, I'm 28 now. I don't know how many people want me to make a study tips video anymore.
That's awesome. So for everybody on here, let us know where you guys are tuning in from. I am in Austin, Texas. Thomas, where are you at?
I am in the middle of a dark forest, actually.
Oh, that's right. You're on a late night drive.
Denver, Colorado. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And I'm going to make my background a little less distracting. I'll make it fish for now.
Love it. All right. We got folks from New York. Where else? Ooh, New York. That's tough. My sisters are there, and it's not a great place to be right now.
Yeah, I've got several friends in New York.
It's getting tough out there, but God bless everybody. Hope everybody is staying safe and well. We got Santa Barbara, Chicago. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us this morning. We have, I think, a ton of stuff that is really going to help people out. Let me give you a bit of background on Thomas before we dive in. If you are not one of his 1.8 million YouTube subscribers, then let me tell you. So Thomas Frank is a YouTuber, podcaster, and writer who focuses on helping people of all ages improve their productivity and ability to learn. On his 1.8 million subscriber YouTube channel, he creates videos that tackle task management, organization, self-discipline, and more. He is also the founder of College Info Geek, one of the web's largest resources for students looking to get ahead, and is the author of 10 Steps to Earning Awesome Grades While Studying Less, which has been downloaded over 400,000 times and was published in audiobook format by Brilliance Publishing. Man, I wish I had that when I was in college.
It sounds like a publicist wrote that. I felt so weird writing that bio.
Dude, I love reading people's bios because they just make me feel so insignificant when I'm like, geez, these people are crazy. What about that stands out most to you? Like, does one of those things feel like, I can't believe like that's me? Is it the YouTube, the 400,000? Those are just some big numbers.
Yeah. Everything, right? And I think like, people working in the internet age have to acknowledge a little bit of like the privilege of being able to work with this machine that has the ability to publish what you write to so many people. Mm-hmm. Like my parents didn't have that. So it sounds crazy, but it's like, man, like just like us as a species building something that allows individuals to communicate on such a large scale it's even crazier to think about.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And you were saying before that one of those videos that you were gonna create before you created a video that ended up going viral was on the 80-20 principle and just how you can get these like massive like leverages of scale, which the internet provides, which is just, I mean, clearly you've been a beneficiary of that, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm. It's nuts. When I think about it now, when I used to put out a blog post, I would spend probably 50% of my time just trying to promote it versus the other 50% being about content creation. I remember Derek Halpern from Social Triggers back in the day being like, you should spend 20% of your time making the content, 80% of the time promoting it. And now it's like, boy, if that 80-20 rule has flipped entirely because the content distribution algorithms, especially on YouTube, they're going to promote far more than I could ever do via Twitter, social followings, anything like that. So I should honestly be spending about 100% of my time just making good content and letting the algorithm hopefully just do its thing. Yeah,
That's not
it's
so. Where do you
it's split.
spend that like distribution time? Like, is it spent in like optimizing it for YouTube, or like once you create the video, it's edited, it's good to go? What are a couple of those steps that you take to be like, let me put in 20% of the effort to get 80% of the results?
For promoting?
Yeah.
So I mean, you're probably expecting the typical like, hey, I put it on Twitter, I put it on Instagram, I send it to my email list, and I do those things. But on YouTube specifically, there are three key elements to the success of any video, and those are title, thumbnail, and watch time percentage. Or it may be raw watch time. It kind of flips between the two different metrics. So really, if you want to be successful on YouTube, you need to make a killer thumbnail that grabs interest right away. And I always say it has to put a question in the mind of the viewer that must be answered, but also implicitly promise that the video will answer that question. So something like, it could just be like, what's the word phlogiston? That's a question you probably don't know the answer to, but you probably don't care because it has no meaning to you. So it has to grab your attention. And you need to know the answer. Title kind of backs that up. So I spend a lot of time brainstorming titles, coming up with thumbnail ideas, not hacking into, but like bringing up the Chrome inspector and putting my thumbnails into the YouTube homepage by like putting them on Imgur first and then pasting the Imgur link where somebody else's thumbnail would be, just to see what it looks like in context, just to make sure that my titles aren't going to get truncated on the sidebar view, on the homepage view. There's like all this testing. I'll workshop it with tons of people I know, have my fiance look at it. Like that's where a lot of the marketing work goes, because I know, again, like if it's going to throw that video out to a bunch of people on their home screens, if I can get them to click it, then the order of magnitude, I mean, it's an order of magnitude more people that are going to see it versus me just tweeting it an extra time or sending it to my email list.
I love that.
So those things are almost like an afterthought, like, hey, new video's out, here you go.
Yeah. So do you do this before you create the video? Are you coming up with the title and the thumbnails and things like that? Or does that come, are you like, I know this is the topic I want to do, I create the video, and then you're coming up with that after the fact?
It depends. I would say for the most part, I will come up with the thumbnail and the title afterwards. I know a lot of YouTubers actually will say like, hey, it's really smart to have the title in mind and then make the video based on the title. I think I've heard publicists and publishing agents say that the same idea works for book writing. Come up with a killer title for a book and kind of use that as the basis for what's in the book. For me, often I will just get an idea. Like, right now everyone's in lockdown, everyone's in quarantine. I'm like, well, I need to do a series on working from home. That started out as one video on working from home. And then my outline in Rome got so big. I'm like, this needs to be 5 videos. So, the last one was like, all right, well, planning and prioritization is what the video will be about, but I don't really know what the title is yet. I don't know what the thumbnail is going to be. I'm just going to make the video. And then, I'll look through the video. And often I have found that when I get into the creation process, I will think of shots during the script writing process, but also I'll shoot my A-roll, which is the talking head, kind of what you're seeing now. I'll edit that, and then I use my finished A-roll to get B-roll ideas. So any kind of, cool overlay shot, like overhead camera thing, things like that. And often that's where I'll get the idea for the thumbnail. But sometimes it's different. Like I know already what the thumbnail for my next video is going to be, because I was sitting at the table eating breakfast this morning and I'm like, wait, this is a cool thumbnail idea. Wrote it down in the Notion document, and that's almost certainly what I'll use.
I love that. I love the idea of just like I think this goes to a lot of different things where it's like the amateurs will create something and then like they launch it and it's like, okay, what do I do? How do I get this out? How do I get more people? Whereas the professionals are like, okay, I created it. How do I front load all of the work so that like I am putting all of this in and baking it into the product so that then once it's released, the product is going to do all of the work. So doing the title ideation and the thumbnail ideation and getting all of that feedback before you ever press publish. And then you can just like, you already know that it's set up for success.
Yeah. Or at least you hope.
You hope. Yeah.
I mean,
you do what you
being a
can.
YouTuber does feel a little bit like pulling a slot machine lever. every time, just like, I don't know how this one's going to do. I don't know. I
Would have been some
thought
of
the
the
most
biggest
recent
surprises.
one,
Yeah,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
even the most recent one, I thought like, partly because of the fact that I was on a time crunch and had to make this video in 2 days, I was like, this one's not going to do well. I did my best on it, but I'm not feeling super hot about it. And a lot of times it's like, as an artist, you have certain things you fixate on, which the audience does not care about. Oh, the lighting in this shot wasn't good enough, so I feel bad about the whole video. And then it did really well. So, just sometimes you have a feeling about a video and that feeling is not aligned with the reality.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive into some of these tips for folks working at home because you have a ton of great content on this. Before we do, let us know in the chat. One, make sure that your comments are set to panelists and attendees so everyone can see what you guys are saying. And two, let us know what your biggest question for productivity, for working at home is, and hopefully we can address some of that in this. I know we got a lot of you guys on here. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Some people may have been doing remote work for a while. This might be new for you. So let us know, and feel free to type questions as we're going throughout, and we'll circle back to those. But Thomas, some of the stuff that I saw in some of your recent stuff is kind of talking about how do you set up your environment. I guess we can start with kind of like the physical environment if you're working from home, especially if this is a new transition for you.
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of made a whole video about this. Do you have like a specific place we should start?
Yeah, I mean, like one of the things that you were talking about is like doing separation and isolation, which I think is like, which I could probably do a better job at because I'm just right in the kitchen right now where you can easily be distracted. But yeah, I guess what are some of those initial things like when you're setting up your physical environment to keep in mind?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing for me is I want to achieve a space where I'm not going to be interrupted by anybody else, but also where I have separation from the things that I pay attention to during my personal time. So if I'm really into a book right now, or if I really want to play a video game, I want to keep those things as far away as possible, so I don't have the temptation to switch over to them, or so they're not kind of like pulling at my attention while I'm trying to get work done. So for me, I mean, I'm privileged enough to have a fairly large house at this point in my life. So there's an extra room that I was able to set up as kind of a dedicated office for writing, for research, for admin work, all that kind of stuff. All your, clickety clack on the keyboard work. So that's kind of where I do my work. But a lot of people don't have that. I would imagine, most people watching this are in apartments or, smaller living spaces. And that's kind of what I had to deal with for the majority of my life, starting in dorm rooms, sharing a bedroom with my brother growing up, where he's not always doing homework. He's often like playing video games or doing whatever he wants, or living in a small apartment. So for me, I use these as a way to gain my my isolation. These, and then the kind of angle at which I set up my desk. So I'll either put it, next to a window so I have something to look at that isn't just a blank wall, or maybe just a blank wall. But I want to make sure I'm not, looking out on the rest of the living space where I can see stuff that may distract me when I'm in my moments of weakness, productivity speaking wise. I will also use noise canceling headphones, and those are quite helpful if you live in a noisy environment. Luckily, it's not too noisy here. My fiance is pretty quiet. She just draws a lot. But if I have a noisy environment, I will rely either on those or on closed back headphones. So these aren't closed back; these are open back. These are my favorite headphones, but they would be terrible.
What headphones are they?
These are Sennheiser HD 600s. So they're open back. They have like this amazingly wide soundstage, really accurate reproduction. They're fantastic for gaming. They're fantastic for listening to music and hearing all the nuances. There's stuff in songs that I never knew was there until I got these. But there's just a metal grate here, basically. So, and it's like not even a solid metal grate. It's like a, perforated thing. So if I was trying to isolate, these would not be the headphones I would pick. I have a pair of like Audio Technica ATH M50s that I love for that purpose. And actually that's what I use because they're plugged into my computer and I don't have to pair them with Bluetooth. But if it's particularly noisy, do the noise canceling thing. My friend Dave, when he gets on airplanes, puts in the noise canceling AirPods Pro and then the Bose over them and gets double noise canceling.
That doesn't cancel it out where you hear everything twice as well.
It doesn't. No, I tried it on the plane once, and it's not super comfortable, so I don't do it. But it does cut down on the noise even more.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of
Surprisingly
being able
effective.
to, like, if you have the space, carve off some space where you can have that be your separate place where you can go and do work. If you
Hmm.
can't, it's going to be a lot cheaper, maybe like $100 or $300 to get a really good pair of these headphones. And I've always underestimated noise canceling headphones, but then when I put on my girlfriend's, I'm like, man, these are crazy. Like, you really do just get locked in. It's like you're in a fish tank where just nobody can really reach you, and it also has the, I guess, the added benefit of then people notice that you have headphones on and you can't hear them, and so it gives a little bit of a distance for them too to recognize that, like, you're doing
Yeah.
work, as opposed to just if you're sitting there with no headphones on, they can talk to you or throw little comments whenever they want.
Yeah, and that's the signaling value there is actually very important. One thing I'll note is active noise canceling headphones have always been very expensive, but when I was researching my video on the environment, I found out that Anchor has a pair that's like $60.
Are they
So
good?
apparently, I haven't tested them,
Okay.
and I don't really run a tech channel, so I don't know if it would be worth it for me to make a video on them. But
Yeah.
the reviews are quite good. Like people
And
are
how
like,
do you
it's
spell, is it
obviously
Anchor just spelt like Anchor, or
Anker. I have one of their
Anker?
Bluetooth speakers, which I use for singing practice in the bathroom every morning. But so they make a lot of really good stuff that's pretty cheap. And apparently, from the reviews I looked at, they were like, the noise canceling is not quite as good as the Bose, but it's pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And
And a fraction of the
one
cost.
fifth the price.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of crazy. Yeah. But
That's
yeah,
nuts.
like you mentioned the sort of signaling value to having
Yep.
headphones on. One of the things I've noticed about working at home, and I've always worked at home, but my fiance has not always worked at home. And when she works at home and I work at home, one thing I noticed is we had to kind of learn how to respect the fact that we were there near each other, but that we both had stuff that needed to get done. Because when somebody is in close proximity to you, you will naturally just think like, hey, I can just, talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when they're away at work, you're like, well, they're at work. I'll have to wait to talk to them. Right. I like it into this. When I was in elementary school, I was so fascinated by the fact that when I would pull out the pack of juicy fruit gum in my pocket to get myself a piece, anybody who saw it was like a shark sniffing blood. They're just like, can I have a piece of gum? Hey, I really want a piece of gum right now. And I'm like, okay, here you go. But 5 seconds ago, before that gum was in your field of view, you weren't even thinking about it. It's not like you really wanted a piece of gum. It's just there was like a little trigger there, and your brain went into overdrive, and you're like, now I must have the gum or I will die. And it's sort of the same thing where it's like if your partner or if you have kids, if their parent is within their field of view, they're like, well, I now want to know something, or I want to get their attention, and I must have their attention, right? But if they're at the office, that same level of desire isn't there
Mm-hmm.
because the proximity isn't there. So there's just some extra work that has to be done to build the respect and the communication structures, and to kind of like get the point across that, hey, I am within your field of view. I'm here, but for all intents and purposes, pretend I'm at the office, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where mentally I need to be right now.
I think
Headphones can
that's
work for
really great.
that.
Yeah, because I
So
imagine
one,
now. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I'll
No,
let you take
just
it.
like now, I imagine there's a lot more people where even if one person was working from home, now they're both doing it. And so there is a lot of that, like, hey, it feels like a weekend. We're both together and we can do this. It's like, it's not a weekend, it's a work day. We have to be able to get that structure in place where we can both get
Mhm.
things done.
One thing that I do, and some people won't need this, but I wake up, I shower, I put on like good clothes,
Hmm.
just because it just puts me in the mental space. I am not one of those people who can work in pajamas, because
Hmm.
I will feel like, oh, this is like just a lazy weekend. So one kind of cool thing to build that separation and to sort of create those communication structures, um, studios have like those on-air signs. So if there's somebody recording, like it'll be lit up on air, stop breathing, stop walking around, stop making noise. And my friend Martin kind of took this concept, and he uses a Philips Hue light bulb, which can be changed with the colors can be changed with an app. And he has it set so that if it's like red, then his fiance knows, oh, he's working on like a really tough programming problem or something. If I interrupt him, his entire train of thought will be broken. So I will, I'll send him Slack messages or something instead. And then she can change the light to teal, which lets him know that, hey, I have something I want to talk to you about. It's non-urgent. Don't worry about it until you're taking a break, but I do kind of want your attention. So I talked about that in my video, and I really loved one person's comment. He was like, I have a Zapier. Zapier, is it Zapier or Zapier? I don't know. I have a Zapier integration that hooks into my calendar. So there's a hue light bulb outside of my office, and anytime I have a meeting on my calendar or something scheduled, it will change the color of the light bulb. So my family implicitly knows I'm in a meeting. Don't bother me, but I don't even have to set it. And I thought that was genius.
Cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Because it's just building systems to be productive where it doesn't rely on you having to constantly make the decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about some of the digital side of things in terms of setting up your digital environment? I know a big one is people getting distracted by their phone, but there's also a ton of pop-ups and noise on your computer. Are there things that you do when you're sitting down to do work, or even maybe before that you do to kind of set the stage?
I mean, the biggest thing for me digitally is close Slack. I will burn entire days just, and I'm part of a few Slacks. I've got my Slack company, or my company Slack, and then I've got the Slack that comes with the agency I work for. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of other YouTubers in there constantly posting stuff, asking questions. Anytime there's people asking questions about gear, I'm I have to go answer it and say, oh, let me tell you about this cool green screen technique I just learned. So I have to close the Slack and just kill the notifications, check it at the end of the day, or do it at the beginning of the day. Otherwise, I'll constantly be procrastinating. And I kind of justify it. I'm like, well, I'm helping people out here. I'm sort of building rapport in the community. This isn't really procrastinating. I'm not really wasting time. All the while, I'm not actually getting a video done like I should be. So close the messaging apps, use them during specific, planned periods of time, unless you're in a position where you have to have it open, which, in that case, it becomes a necessary evil. But if you need to do focused work, don't have a communication app open. And again, there may be culture changes that companies need to make, and maybe you can be the person to spur the discussion about that, where it's hey, maybe we had the expectation of instant answers because for to be honest, a lot of people just jump into Slack because it looks shiny, and then that sort of subtly changes the culture of their company without them ever thinking about it. Maybe bring that up, hey, I can't focus. I found that I'm not getting things done because I'm either anticipating things are going to come up in Slack, or they are coming up, and I'm breaking my attention away from what I'm doing to answer people's questions. There are other tools like Twist is a cool one where it's thread based. It's not real time chat. The people who make Todoist make that one. But also you don't really have to find a new tool for it. Just don't have it open all the time. Mm-hmm. It's like the gum thing all over again. People kind of come to expect and want that thing that they can see, but once it's out of sight, out of mind, they sort of forget about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can set some of those away messages as well to it would almost act like a digital headphones where it's oh, okay, he's in the zone, he's working, I can't expect an instant reply.
Yeah. So somebody in the chat, Andrew, says, would cold turkey work? And that's a great example of an app that is very helpful for people who maybe need a bit of help with dealing with distractions. So cold turkey is an app that can block distracting websites. It can block any kind of apps that you find distracting. So you can use an app like that. There are others like Freedom. There's one called Focal Filter. There's one called Self-Control for the Mac. There's a ton of these. There are browser-based extensions too. I'm not a fan of the browser extensions because, I'm smart enough to open up another browser window. Oh, my Chrome is blocked from going to Reddit. I'll just open Safari. Whenever I'm setting up one of these kind of tools, and I don't find that I need it, I find that I'm better off just closing Slack. But if I was going to set one up, I try to follow what's called the 20-second rule. So this is basically the idea that if you want to do something less, then you should increase the activation energy required to doing it. And activation energy is just how much time and effort does it require to do this thing? So, as somebody who really likes ice cream, the activation energy to going up to my freezer and getting it is low. Whereas if I only let myself go to the ice cream shop, it's 2 miles away, I probably wouldn't do it that often. If I, take the power cord to my game consoles and I lock it in a box that I have to open a combination to do, it'll probably take me like a good 30 seconds to a minute to get my game console up and ready to play. In which case, I'm probably not going to do it when I should be working because there's no intentionality there. It's just impulse, and impulsive thoughts are probably not going to break through that 1 minute barrier. But if it's just right there, if my Switch was on the desk next to me and I could just start playing Hollow Knight or something, yeah, maybe I would do it. So you have to ask, what is my impulsivity often fixate on, and how can I make it more effort? How can I make it take longer to go and distract myself with that thing?
Yeah.
It's worth noting that the 20-second rule has a flip side too. If you want to do something more, then do whatever you can to reduce that activation energy. So for me, I want to play more guitar. So there are guitars all over the house. They're not in cases. It is recommended, in a mountain dry climate like mine, you should keep your guitar in a case because the dry air will eventually damage it. But I flagrantly ignore that advice because if it's in the case, I won't play it. It takes too long to flap the thing open and take the humidifier out of it and play it. No, if I can just see it, pick it up as I'm walking past it and play it, then I'm going to get way better. And I would rather get more playtime hours than to have a guitar for more years.
Mm-hmm. I love that 20-second rule. And I think because I saw one of the questions, and I've seen this come up on a couple of these interviews where people are like, hey, how do I get things done? How do I check things off? And it's like, maybe you need to think about what are these things that keep distracting you? What, if you're not doing your work, what are you doing? Or do you get distracted on websites? You get distracted by I constantly need to clean my house or whatever it is. So I guess looking at what you are spending your time doing as opposed to what you're not spending your time doing.
Yeah. And it can work to experiment with time tracking. I don't like to actively time track all the time. I think it's a big pain. And I've tested some things where it becomes easier. This little cube is called a timular, and you can just kind of flip it onto whatever side you want, and you kind of write what you're doing. So I have editing on here, and I think it had the light too strong to show it, but it's learning, editing, filming, and I could technically.
So you fill out the things that you need to do, and then you just take the random chance of what you're going to do.
Well, there's an app where you kind of you also fill out what the sides mean, and then whatever side is facing up is tracking that task, so you can kind of get a breakdown of your time. On a long-term basis, I don't like to track my time because I always forget to flip the thing. I'll just switch to my next task. But for an experiment, you can do it for a week or two just to see where is my time going. And I think you have to do it for a couple of weeks, because the first few days at least you're subject to the Hawthorne effect where you're being observed even if by yourself, so you change your behavior. I'm doing so well, look how good I am, self. But eventually that wears off, and you may slip back into your old patterns. So if you can get some data about how you spend your time and where the time goes that you wouldn't like it to go, then you can make more targeted changes.
Yeah, I love that. And another thing I learned from you is the intentions versus abilities, where it's I think people will start off their days being you write down that full to-do list. You're man, I am going to get so much done. And then at the end of the day, you feel terrible because you didn't do anything. On the bullet journaling interview, we were talking about how people will make these long lists, and then they just keep migrating tasks day after day and just constantly feel terrible about themselves because they're overestimating what they can get done.
Yeah. It may be good to just write 3 tasks and have that be it. And the way that I do task management is I have Todoist where I will put the tasks and sometimes give them a due date, sometimes not, but that's kind of the central repository of most tasks, with the exception of content that goes in Notion, just because that's very complicated and benefits from the templates I use. But when I wake up in the morning, I will look at Todoist, I will look at my content calendar and my regular calendar, and then I make a whiteboard list. And something to realize is that whiteboard list doesn't have to have every single thing that you intend to get done for a given day on it. It could just have 3 things, and if by some stroke of productivity magic you get everything done with 5 more hours to spare, you can add more to the whiteboard. So, go check Todoist again and be like, cool, I've got some time and I've got more, more energy. Let me get some more done. But if that doesn't happen, and if, realistically, you probably spend the whole day working on those 3 tasks, well, you got them done, and then you don't feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. And you're leaving slack in the system because there's also almost certainly going to be more things that pop up throughout the day. Like I was doing that today where I wrote down the 3 things I wanted to do. And before 10 o'clock in the morning, I already had people being like, hey, we need you to film this video. It turns around, like we need turnaround by the end of the day. You have to fill out these meeting notes because you're not going to be able to be in this meeting. So you got to update those. And it's like before, an hour or 2 into my workday, you're already getting hit with these other things. And if you've already filled out a complete list of what you need to do, every 30-minute segment, there's no slack for these things that come up throughout the day.
Yeah. Yesterday I was just about to get started on something, and my friend showed up outside my house, and he's like, hey, you know that table and chairs that you were storing for me? I need them now. I'm like, all right, well, that's going to take like 20 minutes. So there's always something that you don't anticipate comes up.
Yeah. Something one of my coworkers told me that he does, and then I heard you reiterate it, is this idea of having a second like login on your computer. For me, I have it. It's called execution mode that just doesn't have any of these other things in it. And I would love to kind of hear how you have yours set up and why that's important.
That's not something that I do, but it was a suggestion I made for the video. Some people do benefit by having like a work account on their computer that doesn't have access to all those things. Personally, I will never be tempted to go to Steam in the middle of the day. I will never be tempted to go play video games during the middle of the day. It's just not one of my distraction triggers. But, answering Slack messages is, or, watching YouTube videos while I eat lunch, or, ostensibly to study filmmaking techniques. That's a distraction trigger. Unfortunately, I often need YouTube for work. So it would be better for me to just like use freedom to maybe block YouTube during certain writing hours. And I find that I don't personally need the distraction blockers. What works better for me is like setting timers and just, being like, I'm going to write now for 20 minutes. I'm going to do 25 minutes of hardcore research. Set a timer. I use an app called Tide on my phone. It's not like Tide Pods. It's just like a cool Pomodoro app. And I'll get to work. And something that's interesting for me, I think this will probably hold for other people as well, is a small amount of time on the timer is just a way to sort of convince your brain that this task you're about to embark on is not as painful as it thinks it's going to be. Because, something like, oh, write this paper or reconcile, all of these transactions from the past 2 months or whatever the work it is you're doing, it's painful. And I was taking a course on like learning how to learn. I think Barbara Oakley was one who had done it. She had mentioned that there's research to show like the brain literally sends signals indicating like pain or anticipation of pain when it thinks about a tough task you don't want to do. So if you can convince yourself like, hey, this isn't going to be that painful. Come on. It's just a needle prick in the arm. It'll be over in 2 seconds. Look away. Then you'll more easily get into it. But once you're into it, that sort of idea that it's painful goes away. So I'll set a timer for 25 minutes, but I'll often work for an hour or an hour and a half because now I'm in the zone. And once you're in the zone, all that trepidation goes away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In that idea of just getting started, where if you have to do this project or you have to write this paper, just set it for 25 minutes and write the first paragraph. And like you're saying, you'll very often just the amount of times I've set a Pomodoro timer and you just keep going because you're like, well, no, it's not as hard as I thought it was. I can power through this. There's a lot more kind of juice in the tank for me. And it's crazy how, any other things that you think about in terms of like, that getting started, getting going idea. I know there's the BJ Fogg, like tiny habits model or atomic habits. I'm curious if there's anything else that you do to kind of trick yourself if there's that project that you need to get started on and you just keep pushing it off.
Well, there's something a little more philosophical for me. And I say like it's useful to approach a tough task from an angle. So the mental image in my head is of like, I guess if there's like a window and like the sun is like directly shining into that window, if I'm just going to walk straight into the window, it's going to be blinding light. Right. But if I come from the side, like I can see the light, but it's like it's not going to blind me. It's like a reasonable amount of light. And I think about that when it comes to really big tasks, because it's like if I sit down, I'm like, all right, it's time to write this entire video. It often doesn't work. But yet I find myself like sitting in my bathroom in the morning, and I'll get like one idea for like, oh hey, I have one thing I want to say about this one little section of the video. So I'll pull out like Evernote or Notion, or just like write it down, and then I'll just keep writing, and more ideas will just start pouring in. And before I know it, I'm maybe pulling out a voice recording app so I can talk out my ideas, and I've like written half the video in my bathroom at like 8 a.m. before I'm actually ready to work. It's because I've approached the task from an angle where my brain doesn't get intimidated by it. So I, allow it to start doing a little bit of work. And then again, once you sort of slip into the flow state, like trick yourself into the flow state, then you get a lot done. Mm-hmm. So I don't really find it that useful to make these grandiose, declarations to myself, like I am now going to do this big task, because mm-hmm. usually I just end up intimidating myself, or my brain will be like, okay, well, yeah, you're going to do that task, but first, clear your inbox, just because then that'll be done. And then, well, you have like this picture you got to go hang on the wall, and that was on your to-do list. Why don't you do that? That'll take like 5 minutes. And before I know it, it's 5 p.m. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I better just, grandiosely do the task tomorrow. And it just keeps going that way. So instead it's like, I'm going to write one sentence, or I'm just going to outline, this isn't the script. I'm just going to like, just make some bullet points. You just gotta give yourself a little bit of push. It's like momentum.
Yeah. And it seems like you also have these tools or systems in place so that when you do get hit with that, you're ready to capture it, whether it's Evernote or having Todoist or having like knowing that you can do an audio recording. So like knowing what the next step is, that once you get it, it's very like within that 20-second rule, you can make it really easy for you to capture that.
Yeah. Big thing for me. And this is like, maybe not big thing, but the Apple Watch, I have one of the 2 buttons on the home screen as the voice memo app. So the other one's like the workout one, so I can hit that and start a workout immediately. But if I get an idea, or for me, it's like song lyrics or a guitar lick that comes to my head, I will just hit that voice recorder button, and within 2 taps, I'm recording immediately. So there's, basically zero friction to getting an idea recorded. It'd be nice if there was like some cool system for getting those recordings automatically named in a better way, because I have a lot of like new recording 95 on my phone, but it's at least, almost frictionless to get ideas out of my head.
Yeah. Have you always been like this? Like, have you always been just one, would you consider yourself like highly productive? And have you always kind of been like this, or was this something that you like slowly developed over time?
I don't know if I would consider myself highly productive. I'll put it this way. I consider myself very knowledgeable about how to be productive.
2 very different things.
I don't know if I'm always super productive personally. I go through phases. Like I think about somebody like, Linus Sebastian at Linus Tech Tips. He and his team put out more than 1 video a day, because they have, I think, 4 channels now. Like, that is incredibly productive if you're defining productivity as, publishing a large amount of content. And I guess it really depends on the metric, right? Mm-hmm. Because for some people, productivity might mean like doing whatever it takes for me to live the life I want to live, which maybe means working 4 hours a day and spending the rest of the time with my family. If you are able to do that, meeting the rest of your goals, then yeah, you are highly productive. You've just defined a different metric. So it's kind of a loaded question, because I think there are societal expectations for what productivity really means. And usually that relates to quantity of output, or amount of money made, or amount of online success garnered. It's hard to say. Yeah. I would consider myself a good learner, though. Yeah. I think one of my talents is getting hyper focused about learning a specific technique quite quickly and then implementing it. Mm-hmm. So that's where I would say my productivity strength is. Where I would say my weakness is in that like crazy output, just like, hyper consistent. I'm going to publish a video every single day. I'm not like that. I get a little bit mired in the artistic side of things, and I'll get a little bit too detail oriented sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Do you find your systems are like constantly changing? Because I have this, me and a buddy have always talked about this idea of like manufacturing novelty as you're trying to get more things done, where it's like sometimes you're using Todoist and then that kind of like the novelty of that burns out. And so you're like, let me go to pen and paper and let me just do long like checklists. And then let me try like, 3 tasks every day. Do you find yourself switching or like cycling between some to keep things like fresh and exciting, or is it one system that kind of like slowly evolves over time?
There are definitely some systems that are pretty static, but I absolutely will experiment with different things. And I feel a particular pressure to do it, given that I run a channel that's mostly about productivity, and I have a big focus on apps and tools. So I'm always feeling like, oh, I should test this method because then I can make a video about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like at some point I'm like, well, you got to make a bullet journal video, Tom, which means you got a bullet journal for 30 days. I haven't done that yet, but that's like a totally different system than what I'm doing now, which is using Todoist and Notion and whiteboards.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I will mix things up quite often. But there's a certain amount of static, or I guess there's a certain amount of like permanence to some of the systems that has to be there because I have a team.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just be like, all right, team, we're switching to Asana this week, and then Monday next week, and then ClickUp the week after that because I just want to know how they all work. Like, no, I can't make my team, put all their real work on hold just because I want to indulge my curiosity about a bunch of systems.
Yeah, fair enough.
So some of them I just test. Yeah, like one of the systems I have changed to recently is I'm using a tool called Roam Research, and I have found that it is a really good brain dumping and writing tool for me. So it is almost kind of made Evernote obsolete for almost all work purposes.
Oh, wow. Is it ROAM or ROME?
ROAM.
ROAM.
And,
okay.
If anybody's ever used like Workflowy or Dynalist, Roam is basically like they have taken the core functionality of Workflowy, which is a bullet list where you can collapse every bullet into a toggle, but also click every bullet to make it the top of your page. So you can just infinitely drill down. They've kind of taken that, but then added like all of these additional features, which sort of make it function kind of like a wiki or like a giant web of connected information. The closest concept that you could compare this to is like a German concept called a Zettelkasten, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But it's kind of like this interconnected web of note cards where everyone has like a reference. And then the beauty of computers is, a program like Roam can detect if you have mentioned the title of a card anywhere else and be like, this is a unlinked reference. Do you want to link it and make it official? And over time, you build this gigantic web of interconnected ideas that sort of, is supposed to emulate the way your brain works. I'm just dabbling with the interlinking part, trying to link when I can. But I find that the fact that I can collapse a bullet list without having to specifically make it toggle, because in Notion you can do it, but you have to like say like make toggle. The fact that I can just like brain dump a crap ton of stuff and then like collapse it, get it out of my field of view while I go on to the next bullet, it just really encourages me to dump more and more out of my head than I would normally. When I was using Evernote, like I'm a very bullet listy kind of person, but I would eventually end up with these very unwieldy, pages and pages long lists of stuff. And then be like, well, where's that thing that I wanted to mention? I can't even remember where it was. It's like, there's just so much here. So I'm using that, but it's kind of frustrating because there's no mobile app for it yet. So I'm like, well, crap, when I get an idea and I only have my phone on me, what do? I guess I'll throw it in Notion and then hope I remember to put it in Roam later.
That's cool. Is this a free tool that people can use, or
it's free now? It's quite new. I think I saw the founder on Twitter saying like the pro version would eventually be $15 a month, which is pretty expensive for a research tool.
Yeah.
People often say that Evernote is too expensive, and it's like $7 a month or $10 a month. Notion can get pretty expensive too. So, there's always the option of using text files, using Notepad, whatever you want. And I say that only kind of joking because there are people who are like, I built a Zettelkasten using like Sublime Text and just a really smart file structure on my computer. And there are benefits to that. Like if it's platform agnostic, if it's just using your file browser, then if the platform stops being updated someday, or if they change to a pricing model that you don't like, well, you don't have to deal with that because it's just your data. But the benefits afforded to me by these platforms are things that I'm willing to take in exchange for some potential switching costs later on.
Yeah. Awesome. I would love to hear about we were talking a bit earlier about the Martin system. Could you go into that a bit?
Which Martin system?
Oh,
because there are now two.
Oh, are there two? the only one that I saw was the back burner, vitamins, front burner, and oven.
Oh yeah. Okay. So this
kitchen
is Martin's
model, I guess.
Kitchen system. Yeah. So this is how he manages his to-do list. So instead of having category-based to-dos, which I can actually just show probably, if I share my screen, this screen. Yeah, so this is like the classic way to do Todoist, where you've got projects in the sidebar, which are sort of category based, and I have kind of overarching projects that I can toggle, so I can see everything under personal. There's house stuff, there's like server stuff is within the business, and I can add due dates, and then they'll all show up in my today list here. The way that Martin does it is, instead of having these category-based lists, he just has 4 lists: back burner, front burner, oven, and vitamins. So vitamins are the little admin tasks that you got to do basically every day. So you take your vitamins every single day. You check your email every single day. You do whatever little daily tasks he has to do. Front burner are the big projects that are currently being prioritized. So there probably aren't a ton of projects in that list, maybe just 2 or 3 at any given time. But that is like, these are the main things I'm working on. Back burner is anything that isn't being prioritized right now. So kind of everything that I'm not working on goes there. And then finally, oven are recurring tasks that aren't every day, that aren't hyper regular, but they still are recurring. So the one thing that comes to my mind is like every 3 months, I check the HVAC filter in my house. So that's a recurring task in Todoist. And his benefit, or I guess the benefit he got from it is, number one, for him, due dates aren't effective because a lot of times the due date gets pushed off, or the due date is arbitrarily set, or like most people, he's not always the greatest at estimating how long things are going to take. So, and I've experienced this too, over time, your today list in Todoist just gets filled with a bunch of stuff that is overdue and you haven't actually gotten done yet. So the next thing he'd have to do is just go through all of these lists that when he was doing category based, just kind of like looking and making sure like, all right, what do I have to do here? Does this need to be done? And he's like, well, the categories don't actually matter to me that much. Like, it's really just a sort of vanity thing to have them in specific categories because I know what I need to do. I just need to get it written somewhere. So he made these lists. That way he's only got 4 to check. And even if he's not perfect about making sure every task has the exact right due date on it, he will see like, here's what's on my front burner. Oh, is this no longer a priority? Cool. Just shove it over into the back burner, or vice versa. Check the back burner. Are any of these coming up? Are any of these getting more important as time goes on? Cool. Shove it on the front burner. And then every day is check vitamins, check oven, and just do it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So
I mean, it seems like
the kitchen system.
So much of this is just, how do you make it as easy as possible for you to win, especially when you're just getting started with this? Like, if you're transitioning to remote work and you feel like it's just all chaos, you have a million things to do. It's like, how do you put the simplest system in place first so you can start checking things off, getting some things done? And then I imagine you can kind of add more complexity to it over time as you're kind of getting more efficient at it.
Yeah. And add it if you need it.
Yes. Not just to add complexity. It. Yeah. So
what
are some of the things
adding complexity to my systems? And somebody asked, what is oven again? So this is from Misha. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Oven is recurring tasks that are not hyper regular, like not like every day. So every 3 months I check the fire extinguishers in my house, or maybe every 3 months I'll go into my server and make sure that the snapshots on my server are, make sure the recurring snapshot job is still going. Or one for Martin is every few months he is supposed to take one of the backup files from Amazon S3 and verify its integrity. Because a few years ago, we had our backup plugins working just fine, but there was a database error that broke the backups, and then we didn't catch it for months and months and months. So almost all of our backups were broken. And if you tried to rebuild a WordPress site from them, it wouldn't work. So we had to go way, way back and find a really old backup, which luckily I keep like super old backups on my own computer, and grab the right MySQL line from the database and paste that into the more recent backup to fix it. So after that, it's like, all right, every 3 months, spin up a backup and make sure it works. So that's kind of look at what Oven would be.
That's awesome. Okay, this is just a selfish question for me because my girlfriend's been giving me a hard time about digital detox in terms of having way too many files and things like that on my computer and my Google Drive. Do you have any like cleanup tips for how to like maintain your digital integrity?
Yeah, number one, don't put files in your desktop. My thing is build a folder structure that works for you, and then there's like that whole like Mad Eye Moody constant vigilance thing where it's like, all right, well, I built my system. I can do one of two things. I can take the time to put files where they need to go the moment that I'm saving them or downloading them, which is what I typically do. Or there is the whole GTD inbox concept. So the Getting Things Done system, which, funnily enough, I've never read that book, so I don't know most of what is.
I think most people haven't read that book, but they know the system.
It's funny because sometimes people will comment on my videos like, "This is from GTD." Like, you just took this from GTD. I'm like, did I? Because I've never read GTD.
Definitely couldn't have.
Yeah, some other dude made up these ideas, but I've never read them. But I know that within GTD, there's the idea of an inbox. So it could be like a actual paper basket on your desk where you get mail, you put files in the inbox, and then you process them later on. Most to-do list apps have an inbox, and you can throw tasks into the inbox with the expectation that you would either do them if they don't take very long, or get them into the right place if you're not going to do them today. Well, you can do the same thing with files, where I don't think your desktop is a good place for this because it gets messy, gets visually cluttered. I have nothing on my desktop, just a cool picture. But you can have like an inbox file or folder where you put stuff and then later on get it into the right location. But I don't like that because a lot of the apps that I use, especially like video editing apps, they reference a lot of other files, and those file paths are important. So if I move things, then that path reference gets broken and I have to go relink. So for me, it's like it needs to go in the right place the moment I save it. And I get on my editor about this. I'm like, hey, if you take a screen recording of something for a video, like make sure it goes into our shared directory in the B-roll folder. Because sometimes like he'll forget and it'll be sitting on his desktop. And I'm like, hey man, that file I need, like it's referenced in Premiere, but it's on your desktop, which is not my computer. So can you put it in Drive, please? So that's a big thing for me. There are some ways you can make it easier though. Because I don't like trawling through folder trees any more than anyone else does. So I use the quick access on the side to instantly get to the folders I need to get to. And there are things you can do far beyond this. Like I think there's a Mac app and I can't remember the name of it, but you can define all these crazy rules for like automatically saving certain types of files into certain directories based on their name or their file extension, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Thank you for that. All right,
we got those cluttered desktop people.
It's not that bad. It's mostly a cluttered downloads folder. Is where everything lives. Yeah. Okay, a couple questions. What habit triggers should people consider when setting up their space?
Well, that's a big question. Everyone has different habit triggers, right?
So how do you define your triggers, or how do you have that kind of like self-reflection to be like, okay, let me think about the things that are distracting me?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is be observant about yourself. Like one good thing for me to note about myself is I will make lunch and I'll put on a YouTube video that takes way longer than lunch takes. And then, now at this point I'm justifying watching the rest of the YouTube video. So it's like, okay, well, food is a habit trigger for binging YouTube for a little bit too long. So there are lots of habit triggers, and The Power of Habit, really good book, talks about a lot of these. Some of them might be like time. Some of them might, time is one. Just straight up desires like hunger could be one. Frustration could be one. And if you look at how habits work, it's like there's a kind of a trigger or a cue. that goes into a routine, and then you get a reward for it. Well, the routine may be partially influenced by what is nearby in your environment. So I'm frustrated with a task. Oh, look, my Switch is there. I'm going to just play a little bit of a video game. Well, if it's not there, then that routine is probably not going to manifest itself in that way because it's not close at hand. It's probably not going to be my Switch there. It's probably going to be Reddit, so block Reddit in that case. But yeah, be observant about yourself and ask yourself, like, well, why did I decide to do this? Did I decide to do it because I am very used to answering Slack messages, and then this Slack message made me want to go research something out of my own curiosity? Okay, well then, Slack and I guess like letting a little bit of social obligation become my justification for distracting myself. That's my habit trigger.
Awesome. All right. Jake is asking, how do I actually do the stuff on my task list and stop procrastinating and being lazy? Adderall, meth, I'll try anything. Jake, I think you got to go easy on yourself, man. But let's see what.
Let's not do the meth. Okay. So there's a ton here, and I have a whole video about motivation and beating procrastination coming up in the Work From Home series. So we'd be here all day if I tried to list like everything out.
I'm going to post a link to your YouTube channel so everybody can hop on that, because there's some gold and a lot of gold in here.
Yeah, and there's actually one specific playlist. It's probably my biggest playlist, but I'll post that in the chat.
Awesome.
If I can get my thing to stop playing here. Here we go. This is like the big one. So a couple of things I'll mention. Number one, Pomodoro technique works for me. Again, it's like set 25 minutes, and you have to set it on an external timer. The whole idea is outsourcing part of the discipline to an external system that keeps you somewhat accountable. If you just say, all right, I am now going to work for 25 minutes, at least in my head, it's like, okay, I'm going to do that right after I clear my inbox. But if I get my phone out and I put it on the desk facing me and I hit start, then I will do it. And the big thing for me is like, it's accountability. It's finding some way to let your monkey brain be accountable to something external. A timer is like the simplest and easiest thing that I could think of there. But I want to mention that, like, if you can get accountable in another way. I am tremendously driven by deadlines. Without deadlines, I probably wouldn't get anything done because I'm a tinkerer. I would just tinker around all day long until I, eventually went out of business. So I have sponsor deadlines. They will book a spot and it's like, well, this spot has to go live in this month. Okay, so I will get it out this month. But if I didn't have that deadline, I probably would just be like, well, I think I need a third camera angle, and I would just redo the video a zillion times. Or overwhelm myself with what I think needs to go in the video and then never get it out.
And so deadlines are also like you're held accountable to them by an external source.
Yeah. So if you can get an accountability partner who will hold you accountable to deadlines, if you can get what I call a Jedi Council, which is a group of other like-minded people who want to kind of be in an accountability group and hold each other's feet to the fire, and they're kind of like invested in everyone in the group getting better over time. Maybe have a weekly call with those people. And at the end of that call, everyone will say, like, here's what I will accomplish within the next week. And I'm going to report back to you after that. Like, that can help build some accountability. For exercise, I have a coach and I film my workouts and I send him the videos. So he'll assign me a workout every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then cardio Tuesday, Thursday. And I have to send him what I did. And for the workouts, I have to film my final set. And it makes me get my workout done. Like, the critiques he gives me in my form are very useful, but 90% of the value I get out of that is if I don't do the workout, I won't have the video clips to send my coach, and coach will be mad at me. So I got to do it. So find a way to get accountability. Without accountability, I think we have so much difficulty forcing ourselves to get things that we don't necessarily want to do done. And we can do all the productivity techniques in the world, but without that big motivating factor there, you're not going to do it. And for some people, like, you don't need accountability because you really want to do the work, right? Those people don't really need to listen to this. So if you're looking for these techniques, then that's not really an argument that flies here, and you need to get that accountability somehow.
Yeah.
I used to be on when I first started my YouTube channel, I used to be on a once per week schedule. And this was for blogging, podcasting, and YouTube. So every week I would have to publish all 3 of these types of content. And I used a tool called Beeminder, which I'll put in the chat. Beeminder lets you say what kind of goal you're going to track, how you're going to enter data, the rate at which you're going to do it, and then it holds your feet to the fire by charging you money if you don't do it. So mine was like, 3 data points per week on my RSS feed, and it was watching my RSS feed, so I couldn't manually enter data. I literally had to see a new RSS item pop up, and it would charge me money if I didn't keep up to it.
That's awesome.
That was another great way of kind of, externalizing the commitment device.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's a great place for us to wrap this up. Do you have any final things for folks where they're like, this was great, where's the best place to get started with this? Like, what's something I can do today to feel a little bit more productive?
Yeah, get the timer.
Get the timer.
The simplest thing, get the timer. Oh, you know what? Oh, you just did it. I need to do all panelists and attendees.
Come on, man. I said it at the beginning of the video.
I have never done a Zoom webinar before. I've only ever used it for like one-to-one or group chats. So,
well, how was it? What'd you think?
This is great. Yeah,
awesome.
I had forgotten that Zoom was like initially meant for, as a webinar platform. Now, like everyone in the world is using it.
Oh yeah, I know. 200 million Zoom calls a day. I just saw in a headline. But Thomas, thank you so much for doing this. This was super helpful for me, and I imagine for a ton of other people as well. Really appreciate you coming on. I've learned a lot from you, and this was awesome. So thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you? Where do you want to point folks?
YouTube.com/Thomas Frank is a good place to start. That's where all the videos are. And then Twitter, I'm Tom Frankly. People want to reach out, same exact thing on Instagram. But you don't. If you're trying to be productive, maybe don't go on to Instagram to follow me.
Do that after 5:00 tonight.
Yeah. Do that during your regularly scheduled social media break and email checking break.
Perfect. And we got Jake's 2-year-old daughter is in the backseat saying hi to you, Thomas. So
hello.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you to your daughter. And thank you all for joining us. Thomas, thank you once again. Really appreciate it. And take care. Everyone have a great day. Stay safe. Get productive. Thank you, guys.